This is Class 8. Reasonable Doubt. Policing and the Criminalization of Hip-Hop. Good evening, everyone. Today's session will be slightly different from our usual structure as we explore a new format that emphasizes independent engagement and collective discussion. Due to a personal loss in my family, as I described last week, which is actually the passing of the loved one for whom my daughter Maria is named, I will not be present in our usual way. Instead, today's class will unfold through a series of video prompts that I have prepared, with video and written prompts, guiding you through key moments of discussion, reflection, and analysis. This shift is not just a matter of necessity, but it's also an opportunity to practice autonomous learning and community-driven discussion skills that are crucial in scholarship, teaching, and, of course, life. Hip-hop itself is an art form deeply rooted in collective storytelling, in passing knowledge through shared experience, and in creating space for voices that are often unheard. Today, you will engage with the material in dialogue with one another, pushing yourselves to critically examine the ways policing and criminalization shape hip-hop's past and present. Though the class is framed by themes of surveillance, oppression, and resistance, I hope that we also can recognize the ways in which hip-hop speaks to survival, resilience, and rebirth. In moments of death and darkness, may we find life and light, not just in mourning, but in music, in movement, and in the act of seeking truth together. From surveillance to sentencing, how hip-hop became a target for criminalization. So moving into today's material, we examine the long and deeply rooted history of hip-hop's criminalization and surveillance, a pattern that mirrors the ways black activism has been policed and suppressed for decades. Hip-hop, as an artist and cultural movement, has been a powerful force for documenting injustice, exposing police brutality, and amplifying the voices of those marginalized by the legal system. However, because of its power, hip-hop has also been aggressively monitored, censored, as we've explored in previous sessions, and even used as evidence in criminal cases. Today we focus on how hip-hop artists have been systematically targeted by law enforcement, how hip-hop lyrics have been weaponized against artists in court, and how the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and gang laws have shaped hip-hop narratives. These are not isolated issues. They are part of a larger framework of state control that disproportionately impacts Black and Latino communities, making hip-hop one of the most policed art forms in modern history. So let's numbered outline the objectives for today's class. 1. Explore the long history of hip-hop's criminalization and its parallels with the broader surveillance of Black activism. 2. Analyze how law enforcement has used hip-hop lyrics, videos, and personas as evidence in criminal cases and how this disproportionately impacts Black artists. 3. Examine how the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and gang laws have shaped hip-hop narratives, forcing artists to navigate themes of survival, street life, and systemic oppression. And 4. Investigate the tension between artistic expression and legal scrutiny, particularly in the context of the RICO Act and gang-related prosecutions of artists like Young Thug and Gunna. So here's some historical context about the criminalization of hip-hop. To understand why hip-hop is frequently police censored and used as a legal weapon against its own creators, we must recognize that this is a pattern that follows a historical blueprint. From the civil rights era to today, Black resistance movements have been heavily monitored and suppressed by the government. The COINTELPRO program, run by the FBI during the 60s and 70s, explicitly sought to disrupt and neutralize Black activist groups, including the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Many of these tactics, illegal surveillance, false criminal charges, and media smear campaigns, are eerily similar to the modern-day surveillance and criminalization of hip-hop artists. As hip-hop became a dominant form of cultural and political expression in the 1980s and 1990s, it too became a target of government intervention and law enforcement repression. Some key moments to illustrate this trend include, first, the NYPD's hip-hop police surveillance unit. This New York law enforcement sub-agency has maintained a dedicated hip-hop intelligence unit over 2 decades, over more than 2 decades, really. This mirrors the COINTELPRO surveillance of black civil rights leaders, reinforcing the idea that black cultural movements are treated as threats to state control. And the artists monitored include Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Busta Rhymes, and Cardi B. Number 2, the RICO charges against YSL, Young Thug and Gunna, and the criminalization of lyrics more broadly. In 2022, Young Thug and Gunna were indicted under the RICO Act, with lyrics, music videos, and social media posts cited as criminal evidence, or as evidence of criminal activity, really. The case set a dangerous precedent, reinforcing the idea that rap music, unlike other artistic genres for some reason, can be treated as a confession in court. A key legal question is, should rap lyrics be protected under the First Amendment, or can they be used as criminal evidence? Third on our list is the Central Park 5 case and hip-hop's response. 5 black and Latino teenagers were wrongfully convicted in 1989 after media and law enforcement painted them as criminals before their trial even began. Hip-hop artists like Nas and Public Enemy later referenced the case as an example of how the justice system is weaponized against black youth. Number 4 on our list is the FBI's targeting of black artists, from Tupac to Nipsey Hussle. Tupac was placed under FBI surveillance due to his mother's involvement in the Black Panther Party, showing how activism and hip-hop have long been intertwined. The FBI also monitored Nipsey Hussle, citing concerns over his community building efforts and his business investments in South Central Los Angeles. And 5th on our list is the war on drugs and its impact on hip-hop narratives. The war on drugs, launched in the 1980s, disproportionately criminalized black and Latino communities, expanding the prison industrial complex. Hip-hop artists exposed how drug laws targeted the poor while allowing government complicity in drug trafficking. For example, the CIA's involvement in the crack epidemic. An example of how these hip-hop narratives were referencing the war on drugs. 3 I have here are the title for today's session, Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt from 1996, which reflects how economic desperation forced participation in illegal economies. Scarface's Mind Playing Tricks on Me from 1991 examines paranoia, trauma, and the psychological impact of street life. And Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City critiques systemic cycles of violence and policing in Compton. We'll now move on to our listening and analysis session, where you will engage with 2 tracks that illustrate these themes. Don't Die by Killer Mike, a raw first-person depiction of police brutality and fear of state violence, and A Lot by 21 Savage featuring J. Cole, a song that discusses trauma, success, and the criminal justice system's targeting of black men, with direct references to 21 Savage's own experience with ICE detention. Now I would like for you to reference the listening and music video analysis page on Canvas, where you will see pre-listening context as well as post-listening discussion prompts. Once you're done with the discussion of these 2 videos, after of course watching them and giving plenty of time for people to weigh in, I would urge you then to move on to the final discussion questions, assuming you have time. Those questions for today frame our responsibility to challenge the biases that frame hip-hop as criminal rather than artistic expression. I thank you for your attention as always. Have a good discussion, have a good rest of the evening, and let me know if you have any questions as you make it through this week's proceedings.